The Arizona sun blazed mercilessly across the abandoned airstrip, turning the cracked asphalt into a shimmering mirage of heat. Riley Carter wiped sweat from her forehead with the back of her grease-stained hand, leaving another dark streak across her sun-weathered skin. At 17, she had the calloused hands of someone twice her age, and the sharp, focused eyes of someone who had learned to see solutions where others saw only problems. She lived in a rusted trailer parked behind the old hangar, the same trailer her father had called home when he worked as the airstrip's janitor. Michael Carter had died 8 months ago, leaving behind a daughter who knew more about aircraft engines than most certified mechanics, and a mountain of unpaid bills that kept growing despite Riley's best efforts to find work. The airstrip had been officially closed for 3 years, but planes still occasionally made emergency landings on the cracked runway. Riley had watched from her trailer window as corporate jets, small aircraft, and even military helicopters touched down when weather or mechanical issues forced them off their planned routes. She never approached the pilots or passengers. She had learned to stay invisible, just like her father had taught her. But today felt different. Today, as she watched the sleek Gulfstream G55D sitting motionless on the tarmac with its engine silent and warning lights flashing, something stirred inside her chest. She could hear the hiss of hydraulic failure from her trailer, could see the telltale signs of a system breakdown that would strand whoever was inside for hours, maybe days. Her father's voice echoed in her memory. "Knowledge is free if you're hungry enough for it, Riley. And kindness costs nothing, but it's worth everything." She picked up her father's old toolbox, the same one he'd carried for 23 years, and walked toward the jet. The metal was so hot it nearly burned her fingers when she touched the side panel, but she had work to do. Inside the aircraft, she could hear a woman's voice growing increasingly sharp with frustration, and Riley knew that someone's worst day was about to get a whole lot better. Vanessa Crawford's manicured nails clicked against her phone screen with increasing violence as she tried for the 15th time to get a signal. The air conditioning in the Gulfstream had died, along with the hydraulic system, and sweat was beginning to bead along her designer blazer despite the climate-controlled cabin. "This is unacceptable," she snapped at her assistant Marcus, who sat frozen in his seat like a deer caught in headlights. "I have a board meeting in 4 hours. The Hartley merger depends on my signature being on those documents tonight." Her pilot, Captain Reynolds, had stormed off 20 minutes ago after Vanessa had suggested, loudly, that perhaps he should have checked the weather reports more carefully before diverting to this godforsaken strip of concrete in the middle of nowhere. Through the small window, Vanessa could see nothing but desert, heat waves, and a rusty hangar that looked like it hadn't been used since the Carter administration. Her phone showed no bars, no Wi-Fi, no connection to the world where her voice carried weight, and her name. "Open doors." "Mom," Marcus ventured cautiously. "Maybe we should..." "Should what?" Vanessa whirled on him. "Walk across the desert, flag down a passing tumbleweed, face the fact that we're stranded in the middle of Arizona because our expert pilot chose the most remote landing strip in the continental United States." That's when she heard it. A soft knock on the aircraft door. Vanessa's heart jumped. Finally, help had arrived. She smoothed her blazer, prepared her most authoritative voice, and opened the door expecting to see a uniformed mechanic, or at least someone who looked like they belonged near expensive aircraft. Instead, she found herself staring down at a teenage girl covered head to toe in grease, holding a toolbox that looked older than she was. "I saw the smoke from your hydraulic system," Riley said simply. "I think I can help." Vanessa blinked twice, certain the heat was causing hallucinations. "Excuse me?" "Your plane?" Riley continued, undeterred by the look of disbelief on the woman's face. The hydraulic failure. I can fix it. For a moment, Vanessa was so stunned she couldn't speak. Then, despite the desperate situation, she threw back her head and laughed, a sharp, brittle sound that echoed across the empty runway. "That's precious," she said, her voice dripping with condescension. "And I suppose you learned aircraft maintenance at Desert Springs High School?" Riley's jaw tightened slightly, but her voice remained steady. "My father worked here for 15 years. He taught me everything he knew about planes, and I've been teaching myself the rest." "Your father, the janitor, taught you to fix jets," Vanessa repeated slowly, as if explaining to a child why the sky was blue. "How absolutely adorable!" Riley stood her ground, despite the heat radiating from both the sun and the woman's obvious disdain. She had heard that tone before, from teachers who thought a janitor's daughter didn't belong in advanced classes, from shop owners who followed her around their stores, from people who looked at her trailer and made assumptions about her worth. "Mom," Riley said, her voice calm but firm, "I understand you're frustrated, but that hydraulic system is only going to get worse, sitting in this heat. The seals are probably already starting to warp." Vanessa's eyebrows shot up. "Seals? You think you know about hydraulic seals? I know that if you don't address a Class B hydraulic failure within the first hour, especially in temperatures over 110 degrees, you're looking at a complete system replacement instead of a simple repair." Riley set down her toolbox and pointed to the small puddle of fluid forming beneath the aircraft. "That leak is getting worse by the minute." Marcus leaned forward in his seat, intrigued despite himself. "How do you know it's a Class B failure?" "The sound," Riley explained. "Class A failures are usually catastrophic, loud, sudden. Class C failures are gradual, almost silent, but Class B failures make that specific hissing sound you heard right before the system shut down. It's usually a blown gasket in the secondary circuit." Vanessa's laugh was sharper this time, but there was less certainty in it. "This is insane! Marcus, call for real help!" "Mom," Marcus said quietly, holding up his phone, "there's no signal, and Captain Reynolds walked toward town. He said it would take at least 4 hours to reach civilization and get a repair crew out here." "4 hours?" Vanessa's composure cracked slightly. "I cannot miss this meeting. The board will think I'm incompetent, and Richard Hartley will pull out of the merger." Riley watched the desperation creep into the woman's voice and felt a familiar pang of sympathy. She had seen that same expression on her father's face when the bills came, and there wasn't enough money to pay them all. The look of someone whose world was spiraling beyond their control. 20 minutes, Riley said quietly. "Give me 20 minutes, and if I can't fix it, you haven't lost anything except time you'd be spending waiting anyway." Vanessa stared at her for a long moment, clearly weighing her options. Pride warred with practicality, and practicality was winning. "This is insane," she muttered, but she stepped aside. Riley picked up her toolbox and walked toward the aircraft with the quiet confidence of someone who had found her purpose. Riley lay on her back beneath the Gulfstream's wing, her small frame, allowing her to access spaces that would challenge even experienced mechanics. The heat from the sun-baked metal was nearly unbearable, but she focused on the familiar rhythm of diagnosis and repair that her father had taught her. "There," she murmured, locating the failed gasket exactly where she had predicted. The rubber seal had indeed warped in the heat, causing the hydraulic fluid to leak and the system to lose pressure. It was a relatively simple fix if you knew what you were looking for. Above her, she could hear Vanessa pacing and checking her phone obsessively. "This is insane," Vanessa was saying to Marcus for the fifth time. We're trusting a teenage girl with a multi-million-dollar aircraft. What was I thinking? Riley's hands stilled for a moment. She had heard those same doubts her entire life. Teachers who questioned whether she really understood the advanced math she excelled in. Guidance counselors who steered her toward more realistic career paths. Even well-meaning neighbors who suggested she focus on practical skills like cooking or childcare. But her father's voice cut through the noise. Don't let other people's limitations become your ceiling, Riley. You know what you know. She reached into her toolbox and pulled out a replacement gasket, one of dozens her father had kept in stock from his years of watching mechanics work on grounded aircraft. With practiced precision, she removed the damaged seal and installed the new one, then began the process of bleeding the hydraulic system and restoring pressure. 15 minutes later, she slid out from under the wing and wiped her hands on an old rag. Try starting her up, she called to Captain Reynolds, who had returned just in time to witness the end of her work. The captain looked skeptical, but climbed into the cockpit. Moments later, the engines roared to life, and the hydraulic system indicators on the dashboard glowed green. Vanessa stood frozen in the doorway, her mouth slightly open. The girl had actually done it. In 20 minutes, with a toolbox that looked like a museum piece, she had accomplished what should have required a certified mechanic and specialized equipment. How? Was all Vanessa could manage. Riley shouldered her toolbox and shrugged. Same way you probably learn to do whatever it is you do. Someone taught me, I practiced, and I paid attention. As Riley turned to walk back toward her trailer, Vanessa felt something she rarely experienced, genuine curiosity about another person. This girl had just saved her merger, her reputation, and possibly her career, and she was walking away as if it meant nothing. Wait, Vanessa called. What's your name? Riley Carter, came the reply, already growing distant across the tarmac. That night, alone in her Manhattan penthouse, Vanessa found herself unable to concentrate on the merger documents that had seemed so crucial just hours before. Instead, she kept thinking about a teenage girl in the Arizona desert who fixed impossible problems with quiet confidence and expected nothing in return. Vanessa Crawford was not accustomed to being surprised, but Riley Carter had shattered her worldview. In 20 minutes with a wrench and a replacement gasket, as her Gulfstream soared toward New York, she found herself researching the abandoned airstrip, the Carter family, and the girl who had just redefined her understanding of untapped potential. What she discovered made her even more intrigued. Michael Carter had been more than just a janitor. He had been an unofficial consultant to pilots, helping diagnose problems and suggesting solutions despite having no formal certification. Several aviation forums mentioned him as the guy at Desert Sky who could fix anything, and Riley's name appeared in a few posts as Mike's daughter who inherited his magic touch. But the most telling discovery was a bankruptcy filing from 6 months ago. Riley Carter, 17 years old, had declared personal bankruptcy to deal with her father's medical debts and was currently facing eviction from the trailer that had been her home for most of her life. Vanessa set down her tablet and stared out at the lights of Manhattan below. She had built her fortune by recognizing value where others saw only potential, and Riley Carter represented more raw talent than she had seen in 20 years of corporate acquisitions. More than that, she represented an opportunity. By morning, Vanessa had made 3 phone calls. The first was to her real estate attorney, instructing him to purchase the abandoned airstrip and the surrounding 30 acres. The second was to her head of human resources, asking him to research the legal requirements for hiring a miner in Arizona. The third was to her private pilot, instructing him to file a flight plan back to Desert Sky Airport. "Mom," Marcus said carefully as they prepared for the return trip, "are you sure about this? The girl is 17 years old with no formal education or certifications. The liability alone—" "Marcus," Vanessa interrupted, "how many certified mechanics do you think could have diagnosed and repaired that hydraulic failure in 20 minutes using tools from 1995?
"Well, none, but—" "And how many 17-year-olds do you know who could have done it at all?" Marcus was quiet for a moment. "None," he admitted. "Exactly. Riley Carter isn't just talented, she's extraordinary. And extraordinary people don't follow ordinary rules."
As their jet descended toward the same runway where her world had shifted just 24 hours earlier, Vanessa felt the familiar thrill of a calculated risk about to pay off. She had built her empire by betting on people others underestimated, and she had never been more certain of a bet in her life. The convoy of black SUVs that followed her helicopter to the airstrip was probably overkill, but Vanessa believed in making memorable first impressions. Riley Carter was about to learn that fixing her jet had been the easy part. Now came the real challenge. Riley jerked awake to the thunder of helicopter rotors and the rumble of vehicles approaching across the desert. Through her trailer's small window, she watched in disbelief as a convoy of black SUVs rolled toward the hangar, followed by a helicopter that landed with military precision on the same spot where she had fixed the Gulfstream just yesterday. Her first thought was that she was in trouble, that somehow her unlicensed repair work had violated federal aviation regulations and brought the authorities to her door. Her second thought was that she should probably run. But then she saw Vanessa Crawford step out of the lead SUV, looking like she owned not just the vehicles, but the entire desert around them. Gone was the desperate, sweaty executive from yesterday. In her place stood someone who clearly wielded serious power. Riley pulled on her boots and stepped outside, her heart hammering against her ribs. "What's going on?" she called across the distance. Vanessa approached with a manila folder in her hands and an expression that was impossible to read. "Riley Carter," she said formally, "as of midnight last night, you are standing on property
"Owned by Crawford Industries. This airstrip, the hangar, and everything within a 100-yard radius now belongs to my company." Riley's stomach dropped. "So you're here to evict me?"
"No," Vanessa replied, extending the folder. "I'm here to offer you a job." Riley's hands shook slightly as she opened the folder. Inside were architectural plans, engineering specifications, and a logo she had never seen before. Carter Aviation Solutions.
"I don't understand," Riley whispered. "You fixed something yesterday that most certified mechanics wouldn't have attempted," Vanessa explained. "You did it with obsolete tools, no formal training, and complete confidence. That tells me you don't
Just understand aircraft. You understand problem solving at a level that can't be taught." From behind Vanessa, men in construction gear were already unloading equipment and surveying the area around the hangar. "We're going to build something here," she continued, "a testing facility for next-generation aircraft systems. And you're going to run it?" Riley's mind reeled. "I'm 17 years old. I don't have a degree or certifications or—" "You have something better," Vanessa interrupted.
"You have instinct, and instinct combined with the right resources can change entire industries." A man in a flight suit approached with a tablet, showing technical specifications that made Riley's breath catch. These weren't just improvements
to existing aircraft. They were revolutionary designs that could transform commercial aviation. "The question," Vanessa said quietly, "is whether you're brave enough to try something impossible." Riley looked around at the transformation already beginning. The silence that had defined her life for months was being replaced by purpose, by possibility, by something she had only dared to dream about in the loneliest hours after her father's death. "What if I fail?" she asked. Vanessa smiled for the first time since Riley had met her. "Then you'll fail at something worth failing at. But I don't think you will." 6 months later, Riley stood in the control room of what had become the most advanced aviation testing facility in the southwestern United States. The rusted hangar had been transformed into a gleaming laboratory, and the cracked runway now hosted aircraft that represented the future of commercial flight. Today, Skyfire 1, the hybrid propulsion jet that Riley had designed from the ground up, was making its maiden flight. Representatives from major airlines, aviation authorities, and international media filled the observation deck, all waiting to see if the 17-year-old girl from the trailer could deliver on the promises her designs had made on paper. "Systems check complete," called Jake Morrison, the lead engineer, who had become Riley's closest collaborator. "All indicators are green." Riley nodded, her hand steady on the control console, despite the weight of everyone's expectations. Through the reinforced glass, she could see Skyfire 1 on the runway, sleek, powerful, and representing everything she had learned from her father, combined with resources she had never dared imagine. "This is it," Vanessa said quietly, appearing at Riley's shoulder. "No matter what happens next, you've already achieved something remarkable." Riley's throat tightened with emotion. "He should be here to see this." "He is," Vanessa replied. "Every bolt you turned, every system you designed, every problem you solved, he's in all of it." The countdown began. 10, 9, 8. Riley closed her eyes and heard her father's voice. "Knowledge is free if you're hungry enough for
It's 7, 6, 5. She thought about every person who had told her to aim lower, dream smaller, accept less. 4, 3, 2. She opened her eyes and watched her impossible dream begin to roll down the runway. 1. Ignition. Skyfire 1 lifted off with a roar that shook the control room windows. It rose smoothly, cleanly, cutting through the Arizona sky like it had been born to fly.
The fuel efficiency readings were even better than projected. The emissions were nearly zero, and the stability was perfect. The room erupted in cheers and applause, but Riley barely heard it. She was watching her aircraft, her design, her vision, her father's teachings made manifest, disappear into the clouds. When she finally turned around, she found herself facing a room full of people who had come to witness a test flight and instead had witnessed the birth of the future. Reporters pressed forward with questions, executives extended business cards, and investors discussed numbers that made her head spin. But it was the quiet conversation she overheard between two airline executives that mattered most. "We need to talk to her. That girl just changed everything." The janitor's daughter had become the person everyone wanted to meet. 1 year later, Riley Carter stood before the National Aerospace Innovation Summit as the youngest keynote speaker in the event's history. The girl who had once hidden behind a trailer now commanded the attention of the industry's brightest minds, her innovations having revolutionized commercial aviation in ways that would have seemed impossible just 18 months earlier. The auditorium was packed, but Riley's eyes found the one face that mattered most. Her father would have been 53 today, and though his chair in the front row was technically empty, she could feel his presence as clearly as if he were sitting there, grinning with pride. "When I was growing up," Riley began, her voice steady and clear, "my father used to bring home broken things from his work. Calculators, radios, small engines, anything that someone else had given up on. He'd set them on our kitchen table and say, 'Riley, everything can be fixed if you understand how it works and care enough to try.'" She paused, looking out at the sea of faces, executives, engineers, dreamers and doubters, all listening to words from someone they had once written off. I learned two things from those broken calculators. First, that the most valuable problems are the ones everyone else thinks are impossible to solve. And second, that the difference between broken and working is usually smaller than people think. You just have to be willing to get your hands dirty. The audience was completely silent, hanging on every word. A year ago, I was facing eviction from a trailer behind an abandoned hangar. I had no degree, no certifications, and no connections. What I had was curiosity, determination, and the knowledge that my father had spent his life learning and teaching me. Today, Skyfire Aviation employs over 200 people, and our aircraft are flying with major airlines across 3 continents. She reached into her jacket and pulled out a letter, one of hundreds she had received from young people who had seen her story and found the courage to pursue their own impossible dreams. But the most important thing I've learned is that success isn't about proving people wrong. It's about proving that there's more than one way to be right. Every person in this room started somewhere, learned from someone, and took a chance on something uncertain. The only difference between me and anyone else who has changed their industry is that I got started a little earlier. The standing ovation lasted for nearly 5 minutes, but Riley's favorite moment came afterward, when a 10-year-old girl approached the stage with her mother. "Miss Riley," the girl said shyly, "my teacher said girls can't be engineers, but I saw your airplane on TV, and now I know she's wrong." Riley knelt down to the girl's level and smiled. "What's your name?" "Sarah." "Well, Sarah, your teacher isn't wrong because she's mean. She's wrong because she hasn't met enough engineers yet. When you become one, you'll be helping her learn something new too." That evening, Riley stood alone on the observation deck of her facility, watching planes take off and land on the runway where her journey had begun. Her phone buzzed with messages from investors, reporters, and companies wanting to partner with Skyfire Aviation, but she ignored them all. Instead, she pulled up the voice memo she had recorded on her phone exactly 1 year ago, a promise she had made to herself on the day Vanessa Crawford had changed her life. "Dad, I know you always said I could do anything I set my mind to, but I don't. Think even you imagine this. I'm going to make you proud. I'm going to show the world that a janitor's daughter can fly just as high as anyone else, maybe higher, because we're not afraid to start from the ground up." She smiled, saved the memo, and whispered to the Arizona sky, "Mission accomplished, Dad. But this is just the beginning." In the distance, Skyfire 7 lifted off into the sunset, carrying 180 passengers toward destinations they could reach cleaner, faster, and more efficiently than ever before. And somewhere in the cockpit, the pilot was probably unaware that the aircraft's revolutionary design had been born in the mind of a girl who once lived in a trailer and fixed broken things with her father's old tools. The impossible had become inevitable, one flight at a time. If you enjoyed Riley's incredible journey from a janitor's daughter to aviation pioneer, don't forget to hit the subscribe button and become a part of our Everyday Life Stories community. These real-life stories of triumph, determination, and justice remind us that extraordinary things can happen to ordinary people. Where are you watching from? Drop a comment below. We love hearing from our amazing viewers around the world. Have you ever had a moment where someone underestimated you, only to be proven wrong? Share your story with us.